Now, I would ask Professor Devaney and Dr. Zain Kurdi to come forward for the next presentation, entitled Experiences, Impact and Consequences for Children when Their Mother is Killed. Professor Devaney is the chair of the School of Social and Political Science and Centenary Chair of Social Work at the University of Edinburgh. He leads major UK and international projects. His research focuses mainly on family violence, with a particular focus on child maltreatment, child homicide, child welfare policy, and the impact of adversity in childhood across the life course. Dr. Zain Kurdi is a doctoral researcher in the School of Social and Political Science of the University of Edinburgh, specializing in measuring ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and their link to adolescent perpetration and victimization. She has 15 years experience working in the field, from UN Women and UNICEF to a variety of humanitarian development and research projects, including Safe Schools or the drivers of violence affecting children. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation to be here. It's been a really fascinating morning, and as somebody who spends a lot of time both in clinical practice as well as research, it's been really heartening to hear the discussions and the research this morning. We're going to take things in a slightly different direction, moving away from a focus on child sexual abuse or sexual abuse to think about a different type of harm, which is really the issue around intimate partner violence and what that can mean for children at the most severe end when their mother is killed. We're speaking on behalf of a collection of researchers who have been working across Australia, the UK and Ireland, exploring these issues, and Sian will come on to talk in a moment about the research that we've been undertaking within those three jurisdictions. Like you, the reason that we're here is that we've got a passion for trying to ensure that we create the best possible world and situation for children and young people, while recognizing that not all children are born into the same circumstances, and that as they go through their childhood, they may also experience a range of adversities, sometimes to do with themselves, if they have a disability, but quite often because of the circumstances within their family or their local community. And whilst a lot of the focus this morning has been on trying to think of some of the risks that children may be exposed to within their church or their local faith community, the other thing that I think Sian and myself would like to focus on is the absolutely fundamental importance of faith communities as a source of support, initially to protect children from experiencing the harm that they may be experiencing in the wider community or in their own families, but also helping children and adult family members to recover from the harm that they have experienced. And I think that's something that we would like to focus on today. When a parent is killed by their partner, who may be the child's father or mother, or may be their father or mother's current or former intimate partner, a child experiences a whole series of losses. One parent is deceased. The other may be in custody by the police, they may be on the run, or they may have died by suicide. And the home, the place that we would all like to think of as the safest place for any of us, has often become a crime scene. Some children may also have lost a sibling within this context. We're unclear, both within the UK but also internationally, how many children are affected by intimate partner homicide, although we estimate that in any 1 year in the UK, it's maybe a couple of hundred children. And if you think about that over a number of years, then we're talking about thousands within a UK context and many tens of thousands internationally. To date, we lack a lot of knowledge about children's experiences and what supports are required whenever this terrible thing happens to them. After the homicide, there's a whole range of decisions which need to be taken. Who will look after children? Where will they live? What supports might they require in the short and longer term? And those decisions which are taken in the immediate aftermath of a homicide can also have long-lasting implications in terms of who ultimately cares for children and what that means for both immediate and extended family. Caregivers become central support figures for the child, but often, as we've shown in our research, they receive little support and assistance. And also, families can become these spaces of contestation. So the victim's family may feel that actually they have a greater moral claim on the children than those who are family members of the perpetrator. And yet, the child may have had closer relations with other family members than just the deceased's immediate family. So this has raised a lot of questions, both within clinical spaces as well as research spaces, about trying to understand what do children know at the time about what has happened, why it has happened, and how that starts to shape their own sense of narrative about their lives and what that means to them for themselves in the here and now as well as the future. There's a really important question of how much should children actually be told? And in terms of that version of events, is there a single agreed narrative amongst different family members, or are there different contestations? Well, really, your mother wouldn't have been killed if she wasn't having an extramarital affair, versus actually you've been living in a family where there's been violence over a long period of time, and this is not about any extramarital relationship. There's the issue of whether or not children, as well as being victims, are also witnesses to the crime, and therefore for law enforcement agencies, how much should they actually interview children as witnesses to what has happened, and doing that in a way which is trauma-informed. And then, as I've mentioned, what are the arrangements? Who should actually take care of the children if it is the child's other parent who has actually been the person accused of the homicide? And if it is that parent who's been accused of the homicide, then what ongoing contact should the child have with that individual? And also not assuming that every child in the family may have the same view about that. So there's a whole range of issues around decision-making, who makes decisions, how much should children be involved in some of those decisions, and what are the emotional and social supports that children require. Our colleague, Eva Alisic, who's based at the University of Melbourne and led all of this work, Eva, back in 2015, undertook a systematic review looking at all the work that had been published on this topic. And at that stage, there were only 13 studies internationally which had been undertaken. So it's a very little understood phenomenon and issue. And as you can see, most of the studies have taken place in the US, with a smattering of studies elsewhere. There were 328 children included in the studies from 175 families, and Eva and colleagues were able to look at trying to categorize the outcomes that we should be thinking about in terms of the psychological outcomes, the social outcomes, the physical outcomes, and the academic outcomes. We're just in the process of updating this review, and actually, apart from our own work, there's actually been very little additional work done in this intervening period. What has come out of this is a model of trying to think about the middle blue box, which is trying to think of the incident itself. What have children experienced at the point where their mother or their father has been killed? Did they directly witness what had happened? Were they themselves threatened by what had happened? What information were they given at the time and in the immediate aftermath? And what supports were put in place to help them deal with the chaos and their own feeling of being unsafe at that time? So those are referred to as the peri-trauma risk factors. But we also should put this in the context of it's very rare for a child's mother or father to be killed in isolation of a prior history of violence and abuse within their relationships. So therefore, we have to think of this as part of a continuum of harm and trauma and adversity that children have experienced, and that's the left-hand box. We know quite a bit about those two boxes. What we don't know so much about is the box on the right, which is what happens afterwards. It either seeks to ameliorate the harm and trauma that children have experienced. It can't take away that harm and pain, but it can help children to start dealing with that and to also not let it impede them from moving forward in life. But actually, what are the types of supports that should be put in place to try and avoid some of the difficulties that children may experience? And that's where our research came into play. Zain?
Thank you, John. So, as John was saying, we had a study that took place between October 2020 until May of 2023, and it was funded by the Australian Research Council, and it was mainly taking place in Australia, the UK, and Ireland. And the main aim of this study was to investigate how children's sense of home, relationships, and identity are constructed in the wake of bereavement from intimate partner homicide, parental intimate partner homicide, and as perceived by the young people themselves, their caregivers, and professionals dealing with children in a variety of ways. So the study design was based on semi-structured interviews with young people, caregivers, and professionals in each country, and we were seeking to explore a range of issues, including young people's sense of self and professional decision-making. And participants were recruited through personal contact, victim support organizations, and also general advertising and word of mouth. And data collection, as I said, it was October 2020. It started in Australia, and the UK data collection started later on in November 2021, and it ended in May 2023. So our inclusion criteria for those with lived experience, we were really keen to include children and young people who have experienced bereavement more recently. So we didn't only want to talk to people who have maybe experienced it 20 or 30 years ago, just to see what the current landscape was about. And the inclusion of young children was minimum age would be 12 years old that we would include, and they would have to have been bereaved, so they have lost their parent before the age of 18. There was no upper age limit, although we did, as I said, seek to include individuals who were aged 30 to 35 years, as their experiences are more contemporary and more useful for shaping current policy and practice. And so in total, we had 70 participants, 22 children, young people, so those with lived experience, and then we had 18 adult family members or caregivers, and carers, of children who have been bereaved. So these could be surviving parents, other relatives, and also foster carers. And then we also spoke to 30 professionals who have been involved in providing care or support to a child or were there in the immediate aftermath, such as police, family liaison officers, counselors, support workers, lawyers, advocates, GPs, teachers. So yeah, we didn't have any, our scope was very wide, and we wanted to try and get the views of as many professionals as possible. So the key themes that emerged from our research across the entire study was that children's voice and agency regarding decisions about their life is mostly missing. Children were often not asked about where they wanted to live, what kind of support they required, and even honesty about the narrative or what's actually happening in their lives. Again, the legal status of children and the implications of family relationships was quite evident, because there was this complexity, as John was saying, and not only between the perpetrator's family and the victim's family in cases where the perpetrator was the other parent, but also even within a victim's family, there were often disagreements about where the children should live, how much should they know, and should they have contact with perpetrators. And actually, I should caveat here that in both Australia, the UK, and Ireland, perpetrators do not lose their guardianship responsibilities to these children in the wake of a homicide, even following a conviction. This is something that's, I think, changing in the UK. At least we're having some policy developments in this field. But I would also like to recognize that in Italy, you have a very I think, inspiring law, and I will not try to say it in Italian, but it's the special infant law, where if a child is, the mother of a child is killed by, I think the father or a man, yes, the father, they have a right, they automatically lose any right to inherit from the victim, but also the children are able to change their names and are able to disassociate themselves from the perpetrator and not have to deal with that contact. So that is very unique law. I've seen that in any other context, so I just wanted to highlight that because we are in Italy. So the role of the accused convicted in the life of the child really is pivotal to this. So in the UK, so even if the perpetrator is the other parent and they are convicted and they go to prison, they are still able to make decisions about the child's life. Are they able to go on school holidays? They still get report cards from the children, and this causes a lot of tension for families and the children themselves growing up. Then we found that there was differing support that was received from social workers and school staff in supporting children and extended families, whereby they may not have been trained or had the actual trauma-informed ways of supporting these children, and so that was quite alarming, but not entirely surprising. And then we had things about the role of professionals in trying to promote these reparations and healing processes. And of course, it was highlighted the children's need for therapeutic support, and not only in the immediate aftermath, because often children, depending on their developmental age, are not always ready to receive that support or are not open for it, but that it came out that it's something that should be offered or available across the life course for these children and young people. And of course, the practical and emotional needs of children's new carers was a big consideration that was missing in general, because I've got some quotes to share with you from the study to kind of bring it back to the participants on the needs of carers as well and how that was unmet. And then, of course, children's sense of identity over time. So I'm going to share some quotes with you from our research. So this one's to highlight the lifelong stigma and silence. I can tell you now, it hasn't been easy. I have been to multiple psychologists for my mental health, and I do get little waves of depression stages every now and then. I am still really learning to cope, and I forever will be. She's never going to see me graduate, She's never going to see me drive, pass my license. She's never going to be there for the little things. She's never going to be there for when a baby boy breaks my heart. And it's just so hard because it's the little things that build into big things. So another one, and this is from an interview I did with a caregiver. So this was a grandmother. And so this woman had just lost her daughter. And she was really struggling. She has just retired. She was on a minimum pension, a state pension, and wasn't expecting to take care of, her grandchildren, which is often the case when it's the care of these children are taken over into kinship care, so they go to family members. And she was really struggling. And when the social worker came to deal with the situation, she was saying they weren't allowed I'll go to this. This is the, I apologize. This is the quote I'm talking about. When I was struggling to cope with different problems her grandson, was having, and when I said something to them, they said, but we're not here for you. We're children's services. That is what I was told. So even though when she was trying to say, I need help, I'm struggling, the social workers were saying to her, well, we're not here for you. We're children's services, so we won't be helping you. And sorry, I'll go back to this one. And this is access to therapeutic support. This is another caregiver, a family member, and she told us they weren't allowed counseling for a year because the police said, what if they need to be interviewed for the case? My niece is 10, and the middle child was 7. What are you going to get from them that you can't get now? So this was another frustration and exacerbation from a family member who were aware that these children needed to seek help and counseling, and they were actually denied it by the police. And here's another quote about kinship care. So when children end up in the care of family, there's just such a whole range of not just emotional issues to kind of process, but also a whole range of practicalities, Suddenly, all of your plans for retirement have to be thrown out the window. Now you've got kind of 2 kids under 10 living with you, and actually, you don't have a spare bedroom for them. So this was from one of our professional participants who was reflecting on those kind of challenges in kinship care. And that's the one I just read. And again, so community as a school, as an institution where care could be provided for children. There were counselors I was offered at school, but that was kind of it. wasn't then spoken about ever again. And I feel like maybe if I was maybe pushed a little bit more at that young age, I probably wouldn't be dealing with all the things that I am dealing with now. So I think give them that option and tell them that the benefits is there. And this is my final quote that I would like to share, just to kind of bring into perspective how the effects are not just emotional, and I don't mean to say just to minimize any of the aftermath effects of bereavement, but it extends further into a societal or structural level. So one of our participants who had just graduated from university was, I will read the quote. "I finally decided to try to get in the police. I got all the way past my interviews, did everything great. Vetting was the next thing, and they rang me last week. Yeah, we fear your vetting has been rejected. I wonder why that is. It won't be anything I've done. It's because of what my dad did. It's difficult. You work hard for something, and then because of someone else's actions, I can't do what I want as a carer. As a career, sorry. It's awful. I don't have a relationship with my dad. I have a relationship with my brother. Yes, he hasn't made the wisest decisions, but all his decisions and actions he's made are due to watching my mom die." And finally, just to say some circumstantial factors contributing to differences in life trajectory. In the UK and Ireland study, we were fortunate that some of our sample was more diverse, and we were able to look at differences between the perpetrators that were the other parent versus those that were a current and former partner. And there were quite marked differences in how the lives of those children and young people went in. And of course, needless to say, witnessing the murder was a very big indicator of sort of contextual support that was needed for those children specifically. So even within a family where one sibling had witnessed the murder, that kind of support that they needed in the immediate aftermath looks different than those for their siblings. And we also had some complexities about biological relatedness. In some of our cases, where the perpetrator was the father, but biologically they were conceived through IVF, so he wasn't a biological father. And it brought up all those kind of ethical questions that were quite interesting. John, I will hand back to you.
So just to finish for the last main slide, I think one of the things that comes out from all of this is the lack of knowledge and understanding within the general public, but also amongst professionals about what the particular needs of this group of children are. And also it's not just about the children, but also about those who are going to care for the children, and trying to see the incident as not something which is isolated and standalone, but seeing it in that pattern and history of children's exposure to parental intimate partner violence. What we did recognise was that we had also good examples of where children and their carers did receive support. And that's when communities, such as faith communities, their local church, their local school, came around that child to support them and came around to support their carer, and that people worked together in ways which were mutually supporting of each of the professionals, but also mutually supporting of the child and their carer. So the final message from us is that the work that you do in supporting those who are members of your churches is so very important. And actually these are really difficult things for us to even think about, let alone to speak to a child or another family about, but actually that you can make a real difference in the lives of those children and families. So thank you very much for listening to us today.